I felt his hands at my waist, steady and warm, guiding me through the technique. "Like this," Martin murmured, his breath soft against my ear as he adjusted my grip on the whisk. The kitchen around us hummed with quiet energy, but all I could focus on was the heat radiating from his chest pressed lightly against my back. At 67, I hadn't expected to feel this electric pull, this sudden awareness of every point where our bodies almost touched. His fingers brushed mine as he demonstrated the motion, and something deep inside me stirred to life. "Perfect," he whispered, and I wasn't sure if he meant my technique or something else entirely. The way his voice dropped, the way his eyes lingered on mine when I turned my head slightly, it was all too deliberate to be innocent. I should have stepped away, should have focused on the recipe, but instead I leaned back just enough to feel the solid warmth of him. His breath caught, barely audible, but I felt it. That small reaction sent a thrill through me that I hadn't experienced in years. If you're loving this setup, hit that like button and subscribe. I promise this story gets even better from here. Let's dive in. The cooking class had been Lynn's idea, of course. "Faye, you need to get out more," she'd insisted over coffee that morning, sliding the brochure across the table with that knowing smile of hers. "Besides, when's the last time you did something just for yourself?" I'd rolled my eyes, but something about the elegant script advertising intimate culinary experiences with Chef Martin had caught my attention. Maybe it was the word intimate, or maybe it was the photo of the silver-haired man with those intensely blue eyes and the kind of smile that suggested he knew secrets worth learning. The studio was tucked away in a converted warehouse in Seattle's Capitol Hill, all exposed brick and warm lighting that made everything feel like a scene from a romantic movie. I'd arrived early, nervous in a way that felt both foolish and exhilarating. At my age, I told myself what was the worst that could happen. But as I stood there adjusting my blouse for the third time, I realized I was hoping for something to happen, something that would shake up the comfortable but increasingly lonely routine my life had become since the divorce. "You must be Faye." His voice was exactly what I'd imagined from the photo, rich, warm, with just a hint of an accent I couldn't quite place. When I turned, Martin was even more striking in person. Tall, lean, with those silver curls slightly mussed and an apron that somehow made him look more masculine rather than domestic. But it was his eyes that held me, the way they seemed to see straight through to something I'd forgotten was there. "Guilty as charged," I managed, extending my hand. When he took it, his fingers lingered just a moment longer than necessary, his thumb brushing across my knuckles in what could have been accident but felt entirely intentional. "Wonderful. I have a feeling tonight is going to be special." The way he said it, looking directly into my eyes, made heat pool low in my stomach. This was definitely not your average cooking class. The other students began filtering in, a young couple celebrating an anniversary, two friends trying something new, a businessman who looked like he'd rather be anywhere else. But Martin's attention kept drifting back to me, and I found myself preening under his gaze like a woman half my age. When he announced we'd be making dishes that awaken the senses, his eyes were on mine, and I felt my cheeks flush with more than just the warmth from the kitchen. We started with something simple, a salad with fresh herbs and edible flowers. Martin moved through the class like a dancer, his hands sure and graceful as he demonstrated each technique. But when he reached my station, everything slowed down. His body positioned behind mine as he guided my knife work, his chest a solid presence against my shoulder blades. "Feel the resistance," he murmured, his hands covering mine as we sliced through the delicate greens. "Let the blade do the work." But all I could feel was the strength in his fingers, the way his voice dropped to something almost intimate when he spoke to me. My pulse quickened, and I wondered if he could sense it, the way my body responded to his nearness. The main course was more complex, pan-seared duck with a cherry reduction that required constant attention and perfect timing. Martin assigned us partners, and somehow I found myself working directly with him while the others paired off. "Experience teaches patience," he said with a smile that made my knees weak. And patience, well, that makes everything more intense. As we worked, our conversation drifted from technique to personal stories. He told me about his years training in France, the way food could be a language of its own. I found myself sharing things I hadn't talked about in years, my love for travel, the art classes I'd been meaning to take, the way I'd lost myself somewhere in the years of marriage and motherhood, and only now was rediscovering who I was underneath it all. "You have excellent instincts," he said as I adjusted the heat under our pan without being told. "Trust them." His hand settled on my lower back just for a moment, but long enough for warmth to spread through my entire body. I wasn't sure if we were still talking about cooking. The duck was perfect, the sauce glossy and rich. As the other students cleaned up and began to leave, Martin appeared at my side with 2 glasses of wine. "I have something special planned for dessert," he said, his voice low enough that only I could hear. "If you're interested in staying a few minutes longer." I should have politely declined. Should have thanked him for a lovely evening and headed home to my empty house and my predictable routine. Instead, I heard myself saying, "I'd love to see what you have in mind." The studio emptied around us, leaving just the soft jazz playing from hidden speakers and the warm glow of the pendant lights. Martin moved to the refrigerator and returned with ingredients I hadn't seen during class. Dark chocolate, fresh berries, cream that looked rich enough to sin for. "Chocolate souffle," he announced, setting everything on the counter between us. But not just any souffle. This one requires 2 people, perfect timing, and absolute trust. He handed me an apron, black silk that felt like luxury against my fingers. As I tied it around my waist, I was acutely aware of how the fabric skimmed my curves, how Martin's eyes followed the movement of my hands. The air between us felt charged, electric with possibility. We began to work, and this time there was no pretense of instruction. This was pure collaboration, our movements synchronized in a way that felt almost choreographed. When he needed the whisk, I had it ready. When I reached for the sugar, his hand was there to steady the bowl. We moved around each other in the small space like partners in an intimate dance. "The secret," he said as we folded the chocolate into the egg whites, "is knowing exactly when to be gentle and when to be bold." His eyes met mine as he spoke, and I knew we weren't talking about baking anymore. The souffle went into the oven, and we had 25 minutes to wait. Martin poured more wine, and we settled onto the small sofa in the corner of the studio. The conversation turned deeper, more personal. He told me about his divorce, how he'd poured himself into his work after years of feeling invisible in his own marriage. I shared my own story, the growing distance, the loneliness that had become so familiar I'd almost stopped noticing it. "You deserve better," he said softly, his fingers finding mine where they rested on the cushion between us. "You deserve to feel desired, appreciated." The way he looked at me when he said it made my breath catch. It had been so long since someone had looked at me like that, like I was something precious, something worth wanting. "Martin," I started, but he leaned closer, his free hand coming up to trace the line of my jaw. "Tell me to stop," he whispered, his lips inches from mine. "Tell me this is just about cooking, and I'll step back right now." But I couldn't say those words because they would have been a lie. This had stopped being about cooking the moment. His hands covered mine, the moment I felt that electric spark of connection. Instead, I closed the distance between us. The kiss was soft at first, tentative, as if we were both testing the reality of this moment. But when I sighed against his lips, when my hand came up to tangle in his silver hair, something inside both of us ignited. His arms came around me, pulling me closer, and I went willingly, lost in the warmth of his mouth, the strength of his embrace. When we finally broke apart, we were both breathing hard. The timer for the souffle chose that moment to chime, and we laughed, the sound breathy and charged with tension. "Perfect timing," Martin murmured, his forehead resting against mine, "just like everything else tonight." We moved to check the dessert, and it was indeed perfect, risen high and golden, with that slightly molten center that made a souffle special. But as Martin served it onto 2 plates, I found I was hungry for something else entirely. "Faye," he said, setting the plates aside and turning to face me fully. "I know this might seem sudden, but I haven't felt this kind of connection in years. There's something about you, your energy, your openness, it's intoxicating." His hands found my waist again, and this time I didn't hesitate. I stepped into his embrace, letting myself feel the solid strength of his body against mine. "I feel it too," I admitted. "I came here thinking I'd learn to make a good sauce, and instead, you're about to learn what it feels like to be completely present in your own skin again," he finished, his voice rough with desire. He was right. Standing there in his arms, I felt more alive, more aware of my own body and its capacity for pleasure than I had in years. When he kissed me again, it was with a hunger that matched my own, his hands roaming the curves of my body with reverent appreciation. The apron strings seemed to untie themselves, the silk pooling at my feet as Martin's hands mapped the territory of my skin. Every touch was deliberate, worshipful, as if he was memorizing the feel of me. I had worried, in those brief moments of self-consciousness, about my body at 67, about the changes time had wrought. But under Martin's touch, I felt beautiful, desirable, powerful in my own femininity. He led me to the small office behind the kitchen, where a comfortable sofa faced windows that looked out over the city lights. The space was intimate, personal, filled with cookbooks and photographs that spoke of a life rich with experience. He took his time undressing me, his eyes never leaving mine, his touch gentle but sure. "You're magnificent," he breathed, his hands skimming over my bare shoulders, and I believed him. The way he looked at me, touched me, made me feel like a goddess rather than a woman who'd been told by her ex-husband that she was getting on and letting herself go. When skin met skin, when the careful exploration gave way to something more urgent and consuming, I lost myself completely. Martin was attentive, generous, reading my body's responses like sheet music and playing me with expert hands. Every kiss, every caress built upon the last, creating a symphony of sensation that left me gasping and reaching for more. The rhythm we found together was perfect, unhurried yet intense, each movement designed to draw out pleasure until it became almost unbearable. I heard myself making sounds I'd forgotten I was capable of, my body responding to his with an enthusiasm that surprised us both. "That's it," he murmured against my throat, his voice thick with his own desire. "Let go, beautiful. Let me give you this." And I did let go, completely and utterly, my body arching against his as wave after wave of sensation crashed over me. He followed soon after, my name on his lips like a prayer, his body trembling with the force of his release. We lay tangled together afterward, my head on his chest, listening to the gradual slowing of his heartbeat. The city lights twinkled beyond, the windows, and I felt like I was floating, weightless with satisfaction and contentment. "The soufflé," I said eventually, and we both started laughing. "Completely forgotten," Martin admitted, pressing a kiss to the top of my head. Though, I have to say this dessert was much more satisfying. We did eventually eat the soufflé, feeding each other bites of the rich, warm chocolate while we talked about everything and nothing. Martin told me about his plans for the restaurant he was opening, his dreams of creating a place where food and connection intersected. I shared my own dreams, the ones I'd put on hold for so long I'd almost forgotten they existed. When I finally left that night, it was well past midnight, and I felt like a different woman than the one who'd walked in. Martin kissed me goodbye at the door, long and slow and full of promise. "This doesn't have to be just one night," he said softly. "If you want more cooking lessons, more connection, more of whatever this is between us, I'm here." I drove home in a daze, my body still humming with remembered pleasure, my mind reeling with the possibilities. When I looked in the rearview mirror, I barely recognized the woman staring back, flushed, glowing, vibrantly alive. The next morning, Lynn called before I'd even finished my coffee. "So, how was the cooking class? Learn anything interesting?" "You could say that," I replied, unable to keep the smile out of my voice. "Faye," Lynn's voice sharpened with interest, "you sound different. What happened?" I told her everything. Well, almost everything. Some details were too precious, too intimate to share even with my closest friend. But I told her about Martin, about the connection, about how alive I felt. 67. "Years old and you're glowing like a teenager with her first crush," Lynn marveled. "I'm proud of you, honey. You deserve this. You deserve to feel desired and appreciated." The same words Martin had used, and they hit me with fresh force. I did deserve this. I deserved to feel beautiful, to experience passion, to explore this incredible connection I'd stumbled into. My phone buzzed with a text from Martin. "Can't stop thinking about last night. Any interest in a private lesson this weekend? I promise to teach you something you'll never forget." I stared at the message, my pulse quickening at the memory of his hands on my skin, his voice whispering encouragement in my ear. A private lesson. Just the two of us? No other students? No time constraints? Nothing but the chemistry that had sparked so brilliantly between us. I typed back quickly before I could second-guess myself. "What time should I be there?" His response was immediate. "Come hungry, for food and everything else. 7 p.m. Saturday." Saturday couldn't come fast enough. I spent the week in a state of heightened awareness, everything more vivid, more intense. Colors seemed brighter, food tasted better. Even my morning yoga practice felt more fluid and connected. Lynn noticed the change immediately. "You're practically vibrating with energy," she observed when we met for lunch Wednesday. "Whatever this chef is doing for you, it's working." "It's not just about him," I said, though my cheeks warmed at the mention of Martin. "It's about remembering who I am underneath all the roles I've played. I feel like myself again, maybe for the first time in decades. And this version of yourself apparently has excellent taste in men," Lynn grinned. "I can't wait to meet this miracle worker." Saturday evening arrived with the promise of rain, the Seattle sky heavy with clouds that made the warm lights of the cooking studio glow even more invitingly. I'd dressed carefully, a wrap dress that flattered my figure, heels that made my legs look longer, perfume that Martin had complimented during our first encounter. He was waiting for me with flowers, not roses, but something more interesting, more personal. Peonies in soft pink and white, full and fragrant and utterly romantic. "These reminded me of you," he said as he handed them over. Beautiful, complex, with hidden depths that revealed themselves slowly. The evening he'd planned was perfect. A menu designed to engage all the senses, each dish more intimate and interactive than the last. We made pasta from scratch, our hands working the dough together until it was silky and smooth. The process was sensual, meditative, and by the time we moved on to the sauce, the air between us was thick with anticipation. "Taste," he commanded, softly, holding a spoon to my lips. The sauce was rich, complex, with layers of flavor that unfolded on my tongue. But I was more focused on the way he watched me taste it, his eyes darkening as I closed my eyes and exhaled with pleasure. "Perfect," I murmured, and he stepped closer, his thumb brushing across my lower lip to catch a small drop of sauce. "You have the most responsive palate," he said, his voice dropping to that intimate register that made my knees weak. "I love watching you experience new flavors." The way he said it made it clear he wasn't just talking about food, and when he kissed me, I could taste the herbs and wine on his lips, the essence of everything we'd created together. Dinner was eaten by candlelight, our conversation flowing as smoothly as the wine. But the real feast was the way we looked at each other, the promises exchanged in glances, the careful building of tension that made every casual touch electric. When we moved to the sofa afterward, there was no pretense about coffee or after dinner. Drinks. We both knew why I was there, what we both wanted, and the anticipation had been building all week. "I've thought about you every day," Martin confessed, his hands framing my face as he looked into my eyes, "about the way you felt in my arms, the sounds you made, the way you gave yourself to the moment so completely." "I've thought about you too," I admitted. "About this, about us, about all the possibilities. This time, when we came together, it was with the knowledge that this wasn't just a beautiful accident, but the beginning of something real, something worth exploring. Our connection was even more intense, our understanding of each other's desires deeper and more intuitive." Martin took his time, mapping every inch of my body with his hands and mouth, learning what made me gasp, what made me arch against him, what drove me to the edge of control. And I explored him with equal fervor, marveling at the way his body responded to my touch, the way he murmured my name like a secret prayer. When we finally joined together, it was with a sense of rightness, of completion, that took my breath away. We moved together like we'd been lovers for years, not days, our bodies finding a rhythm that was both fierce and tender, desperate and patient. The release, when it came, was shattering in its intensity, leaving us both trembling and breathless. But even in the aftermath, wrapped in each other's arms, I could feel the promise of more. More nights like this, more discoveries, more connection. "Stay," Martin whispered against my hair. "Stay the night. Let me wake up with you in my arms." And I did stay, falling asleep to the sound of his heartbeat, waking to the sensation of his lips on my shoulder, and the promise of coffee and croissants and whatever came next. That was 3 months ago, and Martin and I have been inseparable ever since. We cook together, travel together, explore the city and each other with the enthusiasm of people who know how precious connection is, how rare it is to find someone who sees you completely and loves what they see. Lynn has become one of our biggest supporters, constantly marveling at the transformation in both of us. "You two are proof that it's never too late to find your person," she says, and she's right. So tell me, have you ever taken a class that taught you more than you bargained for? Ever found yourself completely transformed by an unexpected connection? What would you do if your cooking instructor offered to teach you something off the menu? Drop your thoughts in the comments. I read every single one and love hearing your stories. And if this inspired you to take a chance on something new, hit that like button and subscribe for more stories about second chances and unexpected passion. Trust me, you won't want to miss what comes next.